Hello, Brubs. We're back with the 17-Mile Horror by Dick Gessler. I think this is the beginning of chapter 12. Over halfway through with the book, and let's get on with it. Chapter 12. The Plymouth Historical Museum was located across the street from the City Hall. It was a long red brick building that took up the better part of a city block. On the first floor were the various costumes that were worn in the early 1900s and before. Inside closed cabinets were documents dating back to the founding of the city of Plymouth. In the basement, one could walk down a reconstruction of a typical city street in the late 1840s. The various shops were as they were in that particular time period. Although it was not the masterpiece that the museum in downtown Detroit was, it was still a very impressive sight for those that wished to go back in time and see how their forefathers lived and worked. Sam walked up the steps of the old building, opened the massive doors, and stopped at the front desk. A woman in her late 40s, brown hair tied up in a bun, was busy looking through a large leather-bound book. "Barbara, what are you up to?" Sam addressed the woman. Sam Guthrie." She looked up from the large book, almost dropping it when she saw who was standing in front of her. "To what do I owe this pleasant surprise?" "Well, Barbara," Sam grinned sheepishly, "I'd like to ask a favor of an old friend. Sam, you know that I'd do anything I can to help you out." "What is it this time? Did you find some more clues to the identity of the Plymouth Strangler? And you want me to verify the facts? Or did someone commit a B&E in one of our historic homes?" Sam laughed God damn. Sam laughed at the mention of the Plymouth Stranger, spelled it wrong. It was a series of unsolved stranglings that occurred in 1875. The case was still on the books, and whenever he had a spare moment, he would browse through the reports that were kept in the museum and try to discover some clue that might break the case. "No, Barb, nothing like that. I do have an unusual request, though." "Fire away, Sam. I'll help you out if I can." "Barb, I need the building plans for the Worthington Mansion. That is, if you still have them." "The Worthington Mansion. Yes, I believe we have them in the vault. I think Kate Worthington donated the plans and all of the documents that pertain to the mansion to the museum just before she died." "Barb, do you think the committee will let me see those plans, or do I have to get a court order?" "Wow, Sam, you sound so official. There's no need to go to all that trouble. If you need the plans for police business, I'll let you see them. I don't suppose that you can tell me what you're after." It says "you're after" instead of "you are after." I'd rather not say. It's not that it's classified information or anything like that. It's just a theory of mine that I'd like to push or pursue. "Can you tell me one thing? Is it about those Hines Park abductions?" "Yeah, Barb. That's what it's all about. I've gotten only a half a dozen clues. If I can find what I'm looking for in those papers, it might help explain something that's been bugging me for quite a long time." Sam followed the stout woman down a long hall to a stairway. When they reached the bottom of the stairs and entered the basement, it was as if they had gone back in time 140 years. They walked on the cobblestone streets of the town as it looked in 1840. They passed the blacksmith shop with its large anvil in the center of the small building. At the rear of the shop, a large fireplace could be seen. On the walls hung horseshoes of every size and description. They passed the general store. As one looked into the store, a large pot-bellied stove could be seen. In front of the counter, at the rear of the store, large barrels containing flour, sugar, salt, and pickles stood side by side. The next door on the quaint street was a drugstore. Large, colorful decanters were placed in the window. Through the window could be seen white ceramic containers that lined the shelves in back of the counter. The next shop was a dress shop. In the window of the shop were two mannequins dressed in silk gowns of the period. A plaque in front of one of the mannequins stated that the gown came from the shop of Worthington's of Plymouth. What a coincidence, Sam thought. An old-fashioned ice cream parlor was the next shop on the street. It was decorated in red and white. The tables were black wrought iron with red and white wired back chairs. I feel like I'm going through a time machine, Sam said, as he looked at the shops that lined both sides of the cobblestone street. Yes, it does give you that impression, doesn't it? Barbara had reached the end of the street and was standing on the wooden sidewalk that was placed in front of the shops. The vault is just down the hall, Sam, Barbara said, as she stepped from the wooden sidewalk onto a carpeted floor. Barbara unlocked the large mahogany door and pushed it open. They were standing in a long, narrow room. Both sides of the room contained shelves. On the shelves were hundreds of manila folders. Barbara walked down the narrow aisleway that separated the shelves and stopped. She reached up on the top shelf and took down 2 manila folders. Here you are, Sam. These are all the papers that Kate Worthington left for us. I hope that whatever you want is in here. You can open them at this table. I'll leave you alone to go through the papers. When you are finished, just bring them up to the front desk. After thanking the custodian, Sam sat down at the small table. He opened the folder marked Worthington Papers. The envelope and the papers inside smelled musty. He gingerly removed the fragile papers from the folder and laid them on the table in front of him. On top of the pile was the original deed to the property that Cecil B. Worthington agreed to pay the sum of $1,200 for the property mentioned in the deed. That was a sizable amount for property in those days, Sam thought. The next document was the last will and testament of Ginny and Pete's father. The other papers were receipts for the money that was paid for the property. An insurance policy. And there goes the book. An insurance policy in the amount of $25,000 and a legal description of the property. Sam returned the musty papers to the folder and laid it aside. He picked the folder marked building plans. The envelope was tied together with string. Sam fumbled with the old knots in an anxious effort to get to the contents of the folder. He finally managed to untangle the knots and remove the contents of the envelope. The first paper he looked at was the architect's drawing of the mansion. It looked quite different from the imposing structure that stood on the property today. The drawing did not include the large porch that Kate Worthington had added later. It also did not show the large wrought iron fence or the bay window that was added later. The next paper was the building plan for the first floor. Sam went over every line in the architect's plan, but found no indication that a secret staircase was built in the home. He looked at the next paper on the pile. These were the plans for the full basement that Cecil P. had ordered built. Sam knew very little about building plans. He had hoped that the architect would mark the location of the staircase, thus enabling him to have the proof he needed to substantiate the theory that he had in mind. Put this on here. As he went over the various lines in the plan, he noticed some writing in a space that must have been the main part of the basement. He could just make out the words wine cellar. That has got to be the old wine cellar that rumor has that old Cecil P. built in the house without telling his wife until later on in the marriage. He laid this paper aside and looked at the next paper on the pile. It was the floor plan for the second floor. The plan showed the various bedrooms, each with its own individual fireplace. The plan included the 2 bathrooms and the plan for the master bedroom that Ginny occupied. Once again, Sam carefully checked each line in the musty drawing. Nothing. There was nothing to indicate that old Cecil P. had ever intended to build a hidden staircase in the large mansion. God damn it, Sam swore out loud. There goes my theory all shot to hell. Sam disgustedly picked up the next paper on the pile. Across the top of the paper was written emergency exit to be used in case of fire. As Sam's inexperienced eyes looked at the plan, he suddenly realized that this was it. This was the hidden staircase that he had been hoping he could find. The drawing was a top view of the master bedroom. It showed the fireplace. Behind the fireplace was a hidden sliding door. He could see a landing drawn in the plan and some steps leading to the old wine cellar. Sam frantically searched the plan for a mechanism that would open the sliding panel. He found nothing. Quickly setting the paper aside, he reached for the last paper in the pile. This paper was entitled Mechanism for Emergency Exit. I found it, Sam shouted in the quiet room. The plan showed a detail of the fireplace in Ginny's room. Behind the second brick, in the second row of bricks, was the triggering mechanism that opened the sliding door. The plan went on to explain the various springs and mechanisms that were to be used in the secret door. Sam could have cared less about these incidentals. He had what he came for. He now knew how Pete carried the bodies from the embalming room to his sister's bedroom. He could now put the plan that he had been working on in effect. He replaced the age-old papers in the respective folders, walked out of the room through the replica of the old street and up the stairs to the front desk. Here you are, Barb, Sam said as he handed the manila folders back to the custodian. I think I found what I was looking for. She looked down at the two manila folders, then looked up at Sam, a smile on her lips. You wouldn't want to tell an old friend what you found in those papers, would you? Barb, if I were to tell you what I found in those papers and what this case is all about, you wouldn't be able to get to sleep tonight. I wouldn't want that on my conscience, would I? Sam reached over the desk and with his forefinger tweaked her nose. Sam walked to the large doors at the front of the museum, was about to open one of them, then turned around and said, Don't worry, Barb. It won't be long before you'll be reading about the case in the Plymouth Observer. Sam walked across the street and into the side door of the city hall. He walked down the short hall to his office, after he had seated himself behind his desk and filled his pipe with tobacco and had the smoke swirling around his head. He sat back in his large leather chair and looked at the ceiling. Well, Sam, he started the conversation with himself, it looks like you have all the circumstantial evidence that you need. Now all there is to do is to catch your suspect. As Sam pieced together the information that he had collected in the past few weeks, he suddenly came to a conclusion. Pete had to have an accomplice. There was no way that he could have abducted the girls, taken them back to the funeral home, embalmed them, and carried them up the secret staircase by himself. It must be Carl, he thought. Pete wouldn't bring in an outsider. Suppose that he found some way to get Carl to confess to helping Pete with the killings. Sarah is a good friend, Sam thought. If I confide in her, I think she will agree that it would be best for Carl and Pete both. If Carl would be willing to confess and help him in trapping Pete, it would go easier on him. I'm going to call Sarah, he decided. Worthington Funeral Home, Sarah answered after the third ring. Sarah, this is Sam. I'd like to come over and talk to you, if that's okay. Why, Chief Guthrie? It's so good to hear from you again. Yes, it would be all right if you came over. Master Pete has gone to the cemetery to take some papers over, and my Carl has gone to Detroit to the casket company. They won't be back for hours. That's perfect, Sarah. I'll be right over. Sam followed Sarah into the kitchen and took a seat at the kitchen table. He didn't know exactly how he was going to tell her that he suspected Carl was assisting Pete with the killings. Sarah seemed to sense that he was uneasy. Instead of putting on the tea kettle, which was her custom, she sat down at the table across from Sam. Sam, goddammit. What is it, Chief Guthrie? that something is wrong, but by the looks of you, it must be something serious. Sarah, Sam looked down at the hands. This is about the hardest thing that I have ever had to do, but I have no choice. Sarah's face turned white. It's about the awful Heinz Park thing, isn't it? I'm afraid you're right, Sarah. From what you have told me, and from all the facts that I have, I almost have to believe that Pete is responsible. There's one thing that bothers me, Sarah. What is that? She was almost afraid to ask. Pete had to have an accomplice in these killings. He couldn't have done it alone, Sarah. That's why I came to you for your help. Chief Guthrie, you can't mean. Yes, Sarah, Sam answered her question. I have reason to believe that Carl has been helping Pete with the killings. Oh no, Sarah cried as she slumped on top of the kitchen table. Sam ran to the sink and soaked the dish rag in cold water. He raised her head and applied the cold cloth to her forehead. There, Sarah, you'll be all right. Sarah opened her eyes. Her face was a chalky white. She gasped for breath and clutched at Sam's arm. I'll be all right, she whispered. Just let me catch my breath. Sam waited until Sarah had composed herself. When he saw that she had gotten over the shock, he asked her again, Sarah, will you help me out? Will you help me? What do you want me to do? Sam had hastily put together a plan to expose Carl. When he had last visited Sarah, he happened to notice the old intercom system that was still in operation. He intended to put it to good use. He also decided that he needed Nancy. Sarah, all I want you to do is give me the key to Ginny's room. If I'm not mistaken, tonight's Pete's mortuary meeting. That will get him out of the house. I would like you to go over to Muriel's. I want Carl all alone in the house. Could you manage that, Sarah? Why, yes, I could, but could you tell me what you have in mind? I'd rather not, Sarah. If you don't know what's going on, it'll be much better for you. I can promise one thing. Carl will not be hurt. Sarah reached up in the cupboard and got the key. She handed it to Sam. As she looked up at him, tears were streaming down her face. I hope we're doing the right thing. Sam put his arms around her and said, Sarah, dear Sarah, it's for the best. You'll see. When Sam got back to his office, he immediately dialed the restaurant. Walters, a gruff voice answered. Wait, this is Sam. Or Walt, this is Sam. Is Nancy there? Just a minute, Sam. I'll get her for you. Hello, Sam. What's up? Nancy, I need your help. What time do you get off tonight? I get off at 6 tonight. Why do you ask? Could you possibly come over to my office after work? I'd like to talk to you. Gosh, Sam, you sound real official. Sure, I'll be there. Thanks, Nancy. See you then. It was almost 7 when Nancy walked into Sam's smoke-filled office. Sit down, Nancy. What kept you? Sam puffed on his pipe as he spoke. Oh, wouldn't you know it, I had a last-minute customer that kept on ordering and ordering. He ate like a pig. Sam tapped the ashes out of his pipe and looked at the pretty girl sitting across from him. Nancy, what I'm about to ask you to do might be dangerous, and I'm not sure it's legal. It's the only way, however, that I can get some real evidence on who our killer is. Now I want you to listen to what I have in mind. If you're afraid or think it's too dangerous, let me know, and I'll forget about it. Fair enough? Sam, you make it sound so ominous and mysterious. If I can help, I'd be glad to. What do you want me to do? Sam outlined the plan that he had quickly concocted. As he spoke, Nancy's eyes widened and her mouth opened, as if disbelieving what she was hearing. When he had finished, Nancy was unable to speak. All she could do was stare at Sam. You want me to do that? She finally managed to say. I told you that it might be dangerous. Maybe I'm getting desperate and asking too much. I feel, however, that if we can get Carl to confess to his part in this gruesome thing, I'll have all the proof I need to stop Pete. Do you think that he might hurt me? Nancy asked, a worried look on her face. I can't guarantee anything, Nancy. It's my guess, though, that he'll be so shocked that he'll just give up and confess. Sam, I don't know. This whole thing is so weird. I'm afraid that I might pass out and blow the whole thing for you. Sam walked around to the front of his desk and sat on the edge. Look, Nancy, If it's any comfort to you, I'll be right there. And if he tries anything, I'll just have to shoot him. Nancy walked over to Sam and put her arms around him. Sam, you know that I'd do anything to help you. And I do want to stop Pete from any more killings. It's just that I'm so scared. Honey, Sam patted her on the back as she clung to him. I can't blame you for being scared. As a matter of fact, I'm scared too. I can tell you one thing, nothing's going to happen to you. All right, Sam, when is all this going to take place? Sarah is going to give me a call as soon as Pete leaves for his meeting. That should be around 9. She's going to leave right after that. So that Carl is alone in the house. We'll go ahead with my plan then. Chapter 13. Sarah had just hung up the phone from talking to Sam when Carl walked into the study. Who was you talking to? He asked. I just called Muriel, she lied. I told her I'd be right over. Sarah walked back into the kitchen, Carl close behind her. I don't see why you have to go over to her house tonight. Why, Carl Warren? I think I deserve a night out once in a while. Besides, Muriel paid me a visit a month ago. I think that I should return the visit. And what do you expect me to do while everyone is gone? He asked disgustedly. Well, for openers, you might do these dishes for me. I didn't get a chance to finish them today. Dishes? Now you got me doing your housework, Carl grumbled. Well, they'll have to wait for a while. Master Pete asked me to look after Mr. Edgecombe. It seems he needs some work. Carl followed Sarah to the rear door, gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, and watched as she walked down the circle drive to the front of the house. Carl turned and walked down the steps to the embalming room. He walked to the instrument cabinet and removed a large leather case that contained a makeup kit. He checked its contents, found everything he needed in place. As he closed the lid of the case and turned around to go out the door, he suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. He listened. Not a sound could be heard in the funeral home. He was suddenly struck with the thought that he was all alone in this large mansion. The hair stood up on the back of the neck. He looked around the dimly lit room. The small light bouncing off the white-tiled walls cast shadows on the stainless steel embalming table. The door that led to the wine cellar and the secret staircase was open. He could see into the musty room. The nightlight on the stairs leading to Ginny's room cast eerie shadows on the stone walls of the staircase. Carl was suddenly struck with fear, a fear he could not explain. He had been alone in this house countless times and nothing ever bothered him. Now, put this way. There we go. Now, however, it was different. He could not account for it. It was in the air. He could see nothing, yet it engulfed him. As he started to close the door of the old section of the basement, he looked in the direction of the staircase. He thought that he saw something. No, he thought, my eyes are playing tricks on me. He brushed his hand across his eyes and looked again. At the bottom of the stairs, a mist began to form. As he watched, horror-stricken, he could see the form start to materialize. He staggered to the door that led to the wine cellar. As he got closer, he could make out the face in the mist. It was the face of Ginny. The pupils were covered with a white film. The mouth was turned up into a hideous grin. She wore the yellow dressing gown with the high lace collar. The same gown she had on when she died. She seemed to float up the stairs, her back turned to Carl. As he watched the ghostly apparition, the room suddenly turned cold. A strong wind suddenly started blowing from the direction of the stairs. The force of the wind threw him back against the doorway of the embalming room. When the mist had reached the landing, it slowly turned around to face Carl. She raised a hand and beckoned Carl to come to her. He cringed against the doorway. With his eyes on the ghostly image that was now standing on the landing, he slowly started to back into the embalming room. When his feet hit the tile floor of the room, he reached for the door and slammed it shut. His body fell against the closed door. He was so terrified that his body went into convulsions. He managed to make his way over to a chair at the desk on one side of the room. He fell into it and laid his head on the desk. He got up, closed the door to the embalming room, and slowly walked up the stairs. He walked down the long hall that led to the front viewing room. As he stood in the thickly carpeted room, lit only by the dim wall light and a small spotlight over the casket that was placed on the east side of the room, he thought he heard a door slowly open. He turned to walk back down the long hall, then thought better of it. "You've gone balmy," he said out loud in the deathly still of the room. As Carl stood at the side of the casket and looked down at the withered face of the old man lying there, he noticed that the makeup that was used to cover up the deep wrinkles on his face was smudged from his right eye to his chin. Pete was right, Carl talked to the corpse. "You need some touch-up work." Carl placed the leather case on the lid of the coffin and removed the small jar marked base cream. Using his fingers, he removed a small quantity of the sweet-smelling cream and applied it to the old man's face. Using a circular motion, he blended the cream into the wrinkled old face. "There you are, Mr. Edgeworth. You look as pretty as a picture." As Carl was putting away the cream, he thought he heard what sounded like footsteps. He turned and looked toward the stairs leading to the second floor. Nothing. When he reached the landing of the staircase, he could no longer hear the steps. "You need a stiff drink, me boy," Carl said as he walked down the hall to the kitchen. He reached up into the cupboard and took down a bottle of brandy. After filling a water glass half full, he took 3 quick gulps. He sat down at the kitchen table, refilled the glass, and took another gulp of the burning liquid. The brandy had an instant effect on him. His body relaxed, the tension removed by the alcohol that he had consumed. As he sat there looking at the bottle, suddenly, God damn it. As he sat there looking at the bottle, something caught his eye. A light on the old intercom system had suddenly come on. Carl looked at the old telephone mounted on the wall next to the row of small light bulbs. Through eyes glazed with the large amount of brandy that he had consumed, he was able to make out the one light that was lit. Suddenly, the realization of what he was seeing sunk into his alcohol-clouded brain. He staggered as he got up from the table. On wobbly legs, he slowly walked over to the light panel. The light that had come on was room number 1, Ginny's room. Carl's face turned white, drained of all blood. His heart skipped a beat. He was unable to breathe. There was no one in her room. Who pushed the button that caused the light on the panel to come on? Carl turned and walked back to the table. He took the bottle of brandy and poured himself another stiff drink. How could it be, he asked himself. Carl didn't believe in the supernatural. Yet, what else could it be? It must be Ginny calling him. He turned and looked at the light. Should he answer the phone? He slowly put down the glass and walked over to the panel. With a trembling hand, he picked up the old instrument. Miss Ginny, he finally managed to whisper. Silence. "Miss Ginny, is that you?" No sound came from the receiver. "Miss Ginny, don't do this to me." Carl was almost hysterical. Carl hung up the receiver and walked back to the drink he had poured himself. He swallowed the contents in one gulp. This time the drink had the opposite effect. It sobered him. He had to go up and see who pushed the button. As he stood at the bottom of the staircase and looked up at her room, he could see a light from under the door. Gripped with fear, he slowly made his way up the winding staircase. When he reached the door, he stopped. No sound came from inside the room. He placed his hand on the doorknob and slowly turned it. He pushed the door open and walked into the musty room. He turned his head toward the dressing table, and his heart jumped in his throat. She was sitting at the dressing table, combing her hair just as he had seen her do so many times. "Miss Ginny," Carl gasped. "It can't be you. Pete and I buried you almost 5 months ago." He walked over to the dressing room and looked at her reflection in the mirror. The abomination that looked back at him almost caused him to gag. The eyes were sunken in their sockets, the skin was gray and peeling from her face in sheets. The mouth was turned up in a fiendish grin. Carl, the grotesque figure hissed, "You did this to me." Carl recoiled from the horrible, decayed, almost decomposed body that was sitting in front of him. He placed his hands over his eye in an effort to block out the horrible scene. "No, no, Ginny, I didn't do this to you. It was Pete. I only helped him. He couldn't bear to have you dead and gone. He wanted you with him always. That is why he killed all those girls. He had to have a new body for you every time you started to get the way you are now." Carl sat down on the large canopied bed, head in hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Sam, who had heard Carl confess to helping Pete, walked out of the closet and over to where Carl was sitting on the bed. He placed his hand on Carl's shoulder and quietly spoke to the distraught man. "Carl, it's Sam. Listen, old timer. I know that you thought an awful lot of Pete. We all do, but we have to stop him. That's why we did this." Carl looked up at Sam, tears streaming down his face. You mean you trapped me? You mean you were waiting for me? Ginny. It is Ginny, isn't it?" Carl looked at the dressing table. He gasped as he watched Nancy peel away the skin that had been applied to her face. She reached for a jar of cleansing cream and applied it to her cheeks and forehead. In minutes, Carl saw the face of a young girl, not the monster he had seen only moments ago. "You're not Ginny," Carl cried. "You tricked me, you tricked me." He got off the bed and started to lunge at Nancy. Sam grabbed him from behind, holding the struggling man. Carl, calm down. It was the only way that we could be sure that you were involved. We also had to make sure that it was Pete who was involved in these murders." Carl stopped struggling and went limp in Sam's arms. Who is she?" he managed to say as Sam held the helpless man in his grasp. "It's Nancy, Pete's girlfriend. I asked her to help me, Carl." Sam helped Carl back to the bed. As Carl watched, Nancy slipped off the yellow dressing gown, letting it drop to the floor. She stood in front of the two men, dressed only in a pair of brief bikini panties. Nancy, Sam stammered, suddenly aroused by the sight of Nancy standing in front of him half nude. "I think you better get some clothes on." Nancy walked over to the large clothes closet and picked up the pair of cut-off denims and t-shirt that she had placed there when she changed into Ginny's dressing gown. She slowly slipped on the brief shorts. She seemed to get a thrill dressing in front of the two men. She reached for her t-shirt and lifted it over her head, arching her generous breasts. She slowly slipped the thin garment over her shoulders. With her right hand, she cupped her large breasts and tucked it under her t-shirt. She repeated the performance with her other breast. After she had finally managed to pull the thin t-shirt down around her hips, she walked over to the bed. "Mr. Warren, I'm sorry that we had to trick you. Sam said that it was the only way we could stop Pete. I didn't mean to frighten you." "Nancy, I'm all confused." Carl looked at the attractive girl with a bewildered look on his face. "Seeing you sitting there in her chair with her face all eaten away, it looked just like Ginny. When I saw her months ago, right after Pete decided to get another body to replace her. That is when it all started. Pete begged me to help him. He had me put the van in the park so he could transfer the bodies from his car to the van. Then he almost forced me to help him with the young girls' bodies. Whenever I asked him to stop the killings, he got that strange look on his face. It frightened me. The last one he killed, I tried to prevent him. I told myself that this was the last time. Sam, I was going to come over to you and confess. I'm glad it happened this way. Now you know. All right, Carl, let's go over to my office and I'll take a formal statement. Nancy, thanks for all you've done. I'll see you tomorrow at the restaurant. Sam got a cup of coffee for himself and Carl, then walked back to his office. Carl was sitting in the chair in front of Sam's desk, head in his hands, sobbing quietly. Here, Carl, I don't have anything stronger. I would offer it to you. Drink this. It will make you feel a little better. Sam took a few quick gulps of the hot liquid. He watched as Carl took the paper cup in shaking hands and placed it to his lips. He slowly sipped his coffee. After a few minutes, he seemed to regain his composure. Composure. How much more is this? Sam, what's going to happen to me? Are they going to put me away? Carl looked down at his cup as he spoke. Sam looked at the man whom he had known almost all of his life. The same question cropped up in his mind. What was he going to do with Carl? In the eyes of the law, there was no question that the courts would decide accessory to murder. And yet he could see why Carl did what he had done. He felt sorry for Pete. He didn't agree that he should take the life of young girls to keep his sister's image alive. However, he understood the boy's grief and subsequently helped him with the bizarre events that took place. When he had tried to stop Pete and make him listen to reason, fear of the boy prevented him from coming to the police. What should he do? He could cop a plea and hope for a lesser sentence for Carl. Plea bargaining was being practiced by all the shrewd criminal lawyers nowadays. He knew Carl would have no problem if he agreed to testify against Pete. Sam looked at the dejected figure of a man sitting in front of him. His heart went out to his old friend. God damn it, why should he let some public defender have a field day for himself at Carl's expense? Oh, he knew of many a young lawyer who would love to take Carl's case. After all of the publicity in the papers about the Hines Park incident, it would make a young attorney famous if he were to get the case. No, he wasn't going to subject Carl to all of that. Here was a man 68 years old. He wouldn't harm a fly. Why should he let them put him away? For the few remaining years he had left, why he would die in prison in a matter of months. No, this was one time when he, Sam Guthrie, was going to bend the rules a little bit. He would have no trouble convincing the district attorney that Carl was threatened by Pete. When he told them that it was Carl who helped him apprehend Pete, there would be no way that they could implicate Carl in the bizarre murders. Sam reached for his pipe and tobacco, which were on top of his cluttered desk. He filled the large bowl and lit up. After he made sure that the bowl was cherry red and would not go out on him, he got up from his chair and walked around to the front of his desk. Carl, there are only 3 people who know that you helped Pete with the killings. Sarah has known about it for a long time. She didn't want to tell me about it because she loves you and didn't want to see you put away. She finally did come to me and told me what she felt. It was her help that we set this thing up tonight. Carl rose from his chair at Sam's last remark. You mean Sarah's turned me in? He asked, almost unbelieving. No, Carl. Sam put his hand on Carl's shoulder, causing the older man to sit back in his chair. Sarah was beside herself with worry. She knew that something was going on and somehow you were involved. She didn't want to see you get hurt and asked me to try and help you. She still doesn't know exactly what took place. The other person, of course, is Nancy. She agreed to help me try and get you to confess to what went on. She went out with Pete a few times and started to fall for him when he went back into his shell, and this turned her off. She still feels sorry for Pete and wants to help stop him so that we can get him the proper help. The other person, of course, is me. And frankly, Carl, I think that's as far as this thing is going to go. No one need to know that you helped Pete. I know why you did it. I know that it was wrong. Anytime you take another person's life, it's wrong. But you didn't take anyone's life. What you did was to help a poor, demented young man who couldn't live with himself with the knowledge that his sister was dead. He's sick, Carl, and I need your help to stop him so that we can get him some help. Get help for him. Will you help me, Pete? Will you help me help Pete? Carl looked up at Sam, unable to believe what he heard. You mean that you're not going to report me? You're not going to put me away? Carl, dear old Carl. Jesus Christ. Carl, dear old Carl. Sam put his arm around the old man's shoulders. You don't have to worry about a thing. Help me to stop Pete, and we'll consider you and me even. Oh, Chief Guthrie, how can I ever thank you? I do so want to stop Master Pete so they can get help before it's too late. All right, Carl, the first thing you can do is go back in Ginny's room and make sure that everything is in order. I don't want Pete to think that we know about him. I think that Nancy left Ginny's dressing gown on the floor. Be sure to hang it back in the closet. Check around the room and make sure that everything is in its place. The other thing is this. I know that Pete is ready to get another girl. I don't think that he really wants to, but this obsession he has will take over again and he won't be able to control himself. If he asks you to help him with the van, go ahead. Don't refuse him. As soon as that happens, call me. I have another plan to catch him without hurting him. Oh, man. Sam stood at the window and watched as Carl crossed Main Street. He watched as the stoop-shouldered old man made his way slowly across the busy intersection. Yes, he thought he had done the right thing. This old man didn't belong in a prison. In all the years that he had known Carl, he never heard a bad word said against him. He was a good man, and it wasn't his fault that he became involved in these bizarre incidents. All he was trying to do was protect a boy who was like a son to him and Sarah. He had tried to stop him, but Pete, in his deranged mind, would listen to no reason. Sam pushed the light button on the coffee machine and waited for the paper cup to be filled. It was almost 10, and he suddenly felt very tired. The incident at the Airy funeral home with the subsequent entrapment of Carl, the old man's confession, and the morbid surroundings had taken a toll on his nerves. He slumped into his large leather chair, still holding the hot cup of coffee in his hand. Now that I have Carl's confession on tape and know for certain that it was he and not some outsider that assisted Pete in the killings, he had to put together his scheme to trap Pete. He took a sip of hot liquid and put the cup down on his desk. He reached for his pipe, filled it, and lit it. He took deep drags, letting the hot smoke fill his lungs. He could feel his body relax. The tenseness was going away. It had been touch and go in the past few hours. After Nancy agreed to help in his scheme, he had called an old friend of his who was in the Plymouth Players. The Plymouth Players were much like thousands of acting groups around the country. It was made up of people from all walks of life who gave freely of their time to be part of something that they all loved, the chance to perform on stage in front of an audience. Linda Miller was one such person. She had started the company almost 10 years ago. The Plymouth Players put on 2 plays a year at the Plymouth Salem Auditorium. With the help of the cast and crew, they were able to sell out each performance. The money they made on ticket sales helped pay for the costumes and scenery that the company would use for their next performance. The ultimate goal of the company was to purchase an old building that they could use for a theater of their own. Linda had told Sam only recently that they were Jesus Christ, I can't read today. Linda had told Sam only recently that they were within $1,000 of their goal. Linda did all the makeup for the company. She had attended a series of courses in theatrical makeup at Salem High School. With what she learned at these classes, and the expertise she had in hairstyling, she owned a beauty shop in Plymouth. She became an expert in the fine art of makeup. When Sam had called Linda and tried to explain what he wanted without revealing the purpose he had in mind, she agreed to come over to his office and do a makeup job on Nancy. As he sat in his office and watched Linda transform this young girl into a decomposed skeletal image of a woman, he was amazed. After an hour, the job had been completed. Linda gave Nancy a mirror and asked her to look into it. When Nancy saw what Linda had transformed her into, she almost passed out from fright. Sam concocted a story about Nancy, telling Linda that he was going to use Nancy in a lineup for the purpose of identifying a corpse that had been found recently. Linda realized that Sam was trying to cover up something, but did not press the issue. After Sam had thanked Linda and she left his office, Sam took a large trench coat and threw it over Nancy's shoulders. She brought the high collar up so that her face was covered. When they arrived at the mansion, Sam parked his car on Church Street instead of pulling into the Circle Drive. They made their way up the back entrance and quietly walked down the long hall to the steps that led to the second floor. They had just reached the stairway when they heard the door to the embalming room close in the basement. It was Carl coming up to work on the body in the viewing room. Sam quickly pulled Nancy into the study and quietly closed the door. Sam could hear Carl walk by the room that they were in. When he was sure that he had passed the door, Sam opened it a crack and peered out. He saw Carl walk into the viewing room and stand next to the coffin. He took Nancy's arm, and they slowly made their way up the stairs. When they reached the landing, Nancy stumbled, her body hitting the teakwood railing of the staircase. Sam quickly pulled her to him, and they made their way to the door of Ginny's room. With the key that he had obtained from Sarah, he unlocked the door to the closet and removed the yellow dressing gown that he was sure. Oh, wait. With the key that he had obtained from Sarah, he unlocked the door and they gained entrance to the musty room. Sam went straight to the closet and removed the yellow dressing gown that he was sure Pete was using for all of his victims. When he was in the room the last time, he had removed some of the makeup from the dressing gown and sent it to the lab for analysis. The report that he got back confirmed what he had suspected. The makeup that was found on the collar of the gown came from a mortuary supply company. It was the type that undertakers use to do cosmetic work on corpses. He instructed Nancy to put the gown on and sit at the dressing table. Sam went to the door and looked out. He heard Carl talking to the corpse in the viewing room. He slowly walked to the landing and looked down into the dimly lit room. He saw Carl close up the makeup case and walked slowly back to the hall. Sam quickly went back into Ginny's room. He left the door ajar so that he could hear Carl's movements. He heard his footsteps in the deathly still of the funeral home. The footsteps stopped at the bottom of the staircase. Damn it, Sam said to himself. If he comes up here now, it'll blow the whole thing. The muffled footsteps continued on down the long hall that led to the study and kitchen. Sam closed the door quietly and turned around to look at Nancy. She had stepped out of her waitress uniform and was standing in the middle of the large bedroom in her bikini panties. She wore no bra. The contrast between the youthful body with her full breasts and the hideous face that had been made up was startling. Nancy reached for the dressing gown and stepped into it. She lifted the musty material over her body until she had the gown almost to her shoulders. Sam stepped behind her and helped with the fastenings. He had urged her to hurry and guided her to the chair in front of the dressing table. When all was in readiness, he punched the button on the wall marked kitchen and waited for Carl to answer. Sam finished the remaining coffee in his cup and reached for his pipe. It had certainly been some night. The plan that he had so hastily concocted went well. He now had the confession of Carl on the tape recorder that he had concealed in the closet. He didn't believe that he would ever use it, but you never knew. The next step was to talk to Tony and try and convince him to help in the next scheme he had to try and capture Pete. He had already indicated that he would help, but when he heard of the lengths that Sam intended to go, he might change his mind. Sam looked at his watch, 10:30. Too late to go over there now. I'll have to stop over tomorrow, or I can meet him at the restaurant. The telephone on his desk shook him out of his daydreams. Taking the unlit pipe out of his mouth, he answered the noisy instrument. Chief Guthrie speaking. Chief, this is Ron at the switchboard. There's a Bob Klein here. He says that it's important that he talk to you. Should I send him back? Bob Klein, that nosy son of a bitch, Sam swore, What in the hell does he want at this time of night? Fuck him. I'm not going to see him. Wait a minute, he told himself. Maybe he's on to something. I better see what it is. It's possible I might send him on a wild goose chase until I get this thing all wrapped up. Send him in, Ron, he said, putting his pipe back in his mouth and reaching for his matches. That was an awful rendering of chapter 13, but such is life.